Cape Fear versus You Only Move Twice, the battle of the Simpsons moving episodes. Also, the battle of the ridiculously funny episodes among the greatest of all time. But we can go with Battle of the Simpsons moving episodes if you want. Yeah, sure. It's also the battle of Sideshow Bob versus Hank Scorpio. 2 villains enter, 1 villain leaves. Which is the better episode? So we got ourselves a Battle of the Titans right here. The Simpsons have done a lot of outstanding funny episodes, but these two stand out as being somewhat similar. Not only because they feature the Simpsons moving away from Springfield, but also because the way they feature their guest stars. In addition, both feature a mini-mystery for us to enjoy. Act 1 of Cape Fear creates intrigue about who is writing Bart the threatening letters, and You Only Move Twice features a corporation with nefarious goals. We all know the truths now, and the suspense is sort of wasted, but they were legitimate surprises at the time, assuming the previews didn't totally ruin it back then. But there still is a bit of dramatic irony when watching them these days. Also, the 2 episodes feature the same James Bond parody. Huh, weird. As always, we'll start with the earlier episode. Mr. Scorpio, you're gonna have to wait. This is the case for Cape Fear. Cape Fear is a classic. It is one of the funniest Simpsons episodes ever produced, if not the funniest, depending on who you ask. Explaining why Cape Fear is awesome isn't exactly a hard task. In fact, it probably does the episode a disservice to explain precisely why something like the rake joke is hilarious. He steps on rakes for an agonizingly long time. It's funny. But this sort of dynamic explains why the episode's jokes are so successful. Simply put, Cape Fear is the superior episode because its jokes are more carefree. This is an episode that taps into basic human instinct, that exploitation of what is inherently funny and what isn't. The rakes are funny. The cactus patch is funny. Putting squirrels down your pants for gambling is funny. The HMS Pinafore is funny. Well, it is now. It doesn't get hung up on the reality of the show, it gets out of its jokes' way. We can give Sideshow Bob a bunch of costumes for his musical performance. We can give Bart popcorn to eat. We can even unfurl a flag at the end. We can also have an elephant step on Sideshow Bob's head. The laughs are what is most important. Now, with that being said, they still have their limits on how far they'll go. Like, they're not going to have the characters fly around or anything like that. We haven't exactly reached the Sherry Bobbins episode yet. But if they can enhance the joke by stretching flexible reality just a little, then they're going to do it. The focus is always on fun. Also murder. There's a lot of great character stuff too. Homer's basically an oblivious dope the entire time, doing stuff like brandishing a butcher knife on his son. And then there's Hello, Mr. Thompson, which is one of the funniest sequences ever. Bart gets to play off Sideshow Bob's nonsense, as well as a string of screw the audience jokes in Act 1. They really take advantage of Sideshow Bob's dramatic nature, his ability to explain himself so eloquently, and Springfield's willingness to swallow any story they're told. He hits the perfect balance of being both menacing and ridiculous. Speaking of menacing, the second reason why Cape Fear is superior is because it has more atmosphere. The other episode is just your typical Simpsons thing. No frills, no pacing change, no attempt at drama. Cape Fear, on the other hand, is an experience. It's got dramatic music stings, the atmospheric shadows, the uneasy feeling that something is wrong. It's positively cinematic. Obviously, a lot of that is due to the source material of the parody, which lets the animators flex their muscles with the presentation. It manages to capture the tension of the original film while still presenting an ironic take on it. The references are written broadly enough that people don't feel out of the loop when they watch the parody first. You don't have to see the film to understand why this joke is funny, for example. It's referential, sure, but it doesn't lock people out. You walk away understanding why Cape Fear is an interesting film. I bet this episode caused a lot of people to check out the original. Or the remake. Either one. And finally, Cape Fear is the superior episode because Kelsey Grammer's performance is better. No offense to the esteemed A. Brooks, but Kelsey Grammer absolutely owns Sideshow Bob. It's the kind of role that requires so much range. But not just range, the ability to switch back and forth on a dime. from bitterness to cheerfulness, from threatening to bargaining. Kelsey Grammer brings dignity to the performance, to be sure, but there's an underlying patheticness that makes Sideshow Bob so compelling to watch. It's one of those magical instances where you could never imagine anyone else in the role. He is absolutely perfect for it. All in all, Cape Fear is a wickedly funny episode that is great from start to finish. It is so funny, I wasn't even able to fit in the amazing "the Bart the" joke into the argument. No one who speaks German could be an evil man. But enough about that attempted murder of a minor. We have a world to conquer. Get out your circle of paper and your glass of red wine, because this is the case for You Only Move Twice. Oh, so you thought that other episode was funny, huh? With its detailed parody. You know, hitting all the beats of that established film. That's cool, I suppose, if you're into that sort of thing. You Only Move Twice, on the other hand, doesn't have to rely on such a framework to come up with its story. In fact, it's so clever and interesting, it did the ironic James Bond spoof a full year before the film industry got a hold of it. This is the progressive episode of the two, the episode always looking for a fresh new take on concepts. You Only Move Twice is the superior episode because its jokes, by and large, are smarter than the other episode. The other episode relies on slapstick in the hopes that a few funny character interactions can carry the day. But You Only Move Twice is more thoughtful with its jokes, always trying to make some underlying point about the world around us. It's much more satirical by nature. It gives Homer a touchy-feely Silicon Valley boss and demonstrates how offbeat it would be to work for him. Or it examines how a dumpy family like the Simpsons would react to a more modern and upscale standard of living. Or it looks at the education system, how even a sophisticated school program can toss its remedial students out of sight and out of mind. In fact, it's even smarter in context to The Simpsons as a series. The other episode just kinda sends the family away, tacitly endorsing that this move is no big deal. We'll be back to business as usual next week. But You Only Move Twice really tries to sell it, giving everyone in Springfield a goodbye. That extra level of effort is there, trying to contextualize the episode with the rest of the series. Even if Homer doesn't end up owning the Denver Broncos in the future. Actually, now that I think about it, the other episode also had a Denver Broncos joke. This matchup was just meant to be, I suppose. This leads into my next point. You Only Move Twice is better because there's simply more variety in it. We touched on this briefly with the satire, but there's an extra effort to give the entire family something to do. Homer does his thing, but we also get Marge back at home having a weird sort of existential crisis. I love how dramatic her red wine drinking is portrayed. Love that music sting. Lisa probably gets the short end of the stick in both episodes, but they at least give her the allergy thing with the chipmunk. And the Bart stuff pretty much speaks for itself. Hooray! Everyone's a winner! This episode could have leaned on the supervillain stuff. I can imagine a much more laser-focused version of the script. Just focus on Homer with the family along for the ride. But it's cool how You Only Move Twice just bounces around everywhere, exploring different kinds of setups that can happen in Cypress Creek. Whether it's buying hammocks or autographed hats, it's the much more active episode of the two. Wow, that transition practically wrote itself. The reason this episode feels so active is because of its guest star, which is our final point of argument. You Only Move Twice is the superior episode because Albert Brooks' performance is better. I mean, talk about an actor owning that role. Albert Brooks is Hank Scorpio. He brings his trademark energy to the character, talking circles around Homer and going off on little tangents every 10 seconds. He strikes me as being more self-aware than Sideshow Bob. He very deliberately and carefully segments his two personalities, always dividing his general friendliness and his more sinister side. He's so ruthlessly efficient and easygoing with his villainy, like none of this is a big deal at all. You end up kind of liking and admiring Hank Scorpio, even though he is, in essence, a total monster. You start to wonder if he's good to Homer because he's a genuinely warm-hearted guy to the people he works with, or he's just calculated everything and concluded this is how an evil enterprise runs most efficiently. I lean toward the sociopathic interpretation because, I mean, come on. but Albert Brooks' performance is so likable, I start to second guess myself just a little. Overall, You Only Move Twice is just fiendishly clever, telling a story with worldwide implications, but still keeping the focus on the entire Simpson family. It is an episode that is ahead of its time. And that's basically it. If you want to kill someone on your way out, it would really help me a lot. Let's go to the verdict. Okay, so this is a problem. Because Cape Fear and You Only Move Twice are both top 10 episodes of all time in my book. So it's really hard to nitpick these two. I think both episodes come together almost flawlessly, so I feel any judgment I come to is going to be a subjective personal preference rather than an argument supported by logic. Obviously, all my showdowns are driven by personal preference to some degree. I'm definitely not claiming total objectivity here. It's just that this decision feels more arbitrary than usual. I feel like Cape Fear is the more uneven episode of the two. You can see how hard the writers worked to get this to reach the total runtime. The opening credits take 2 minutes alone. Act 1 is also really reliant on the intrigue about the identity of the letter writer, so it kinda drags a little on a rewatch. And it unfortunately ends with one of the lamest jokes of Season 5. Sorry, Grandpa. On the other hand, the jokes of Cape Fear sometimes punch a little harder than its opponent. I would describe the jokes in You Only Move Twice to be more witty and clever. It's full of a lot of intellectual and observational jokes, where you process them like, oh yeah, offices are exactly like that. And it's funny. But there's that extra level of thought that slows things down. That's not to say this is a battle of highbrow humor versus the lowbrow, because Cape Fear also has a bunch of those smart observational jokes. It just strikes me as Cape Fear being more effortless with its jokes, relying more on instinct rather than logic. Maybe this is all just code for saying the jokes in Cape Fear are more cartoony than You Only Move Twice. The question now is a matter of style, a matter of which style makes for the better Simpsons episode as a whole. I gave this a lot of thought, and ultimately, if I had to pick only one of these episodes, I think I would go with Cape Fear. Ugh, this was so difficult to decide upon. Because yeah, I've ranked Cape Fear higher in the past, but sitting these two episodes right next to each other, I really have trouble arguing against You Only Move Twice. I mean, my negative for this episode was saying that it was more witty than funny sometimes. What a sick burn that was. In the end, I find Cape Fear just a little more iconic to me. It's full of such distinct visuals and memorable moments. Stuff like Sideshow Bob standing on that deck, delivering that performance. Flanders threatening Bart with those shears. And once again, hello, Mr. Thompson. It's got more of those deep-bellied laughs for me, whereas You Only Move Twice is full of smiles and amused chuckles. And I hate to vote against it, because I would argue that Hank Scorpio is a more nuanced and interesting character study than Sideshow Bob. Scorpio is just not as good of a showman. He's the king of the random little unexpected jokes, that Albert Brooks sleight of hand. He is so dynamic that after my first viewing, I actually wanted to vote for his episode instead. But there's no denying how grandiose Sideshow Bob is, the kind of character that makes every scene immediately better. So that's where I landed for this one. Cape Fear is the superior episode. You Only Move Twice will have to settle for the consolation prize of still being one of the best Simpsons episodes of all time. What a tough break. Do you think I made the correct choice, or should I have gone in a different direction? Maybe you're one of those who thinks both of these are overrated and don't get what the big fuss is all about. You got some attitude, mister. Either way, let me know in the comments. I'm curious to see where people ended up for this one. But for now, this case is closed.